Story 1. Hotter. Fewer people. Vast regions rendered uninhabitable by heat, collapse of agriculture, lack of water. Remaining organized societies at higher latitude refugia, in increasingly awful conditions, ruled by ruthless governments in survival mode. Mass extinctions of terrestrial and marine life, collapse in global biodiversity. Dead oceans, burned forests, melting ice sheets. High chance of nuclear use as desperate governments fight over the last resources. Growing despair and violence in the shadow of oblivion. Human dieback. Story 2. Cameras will be everywhere, complete government control, reminiscent of 1984, but with better technology. This technology, similar to that in Fahrenheit 451, distracts us from what's really going on, which is worse than the current situation. The banning of individual thinking and freedom of speech won't be explicitly stated, but the laws that will be enacted imply it. This could come from either the Democrats or Republicans, as they are two sides of the same coin. Story 3. Population drops to around 4 or 5 billion due to low fertility rates, resulting in cheap housing and lots of abandoned buildings. Robots will supply the missing workforce. There will be pro- and anti-robot political movements. Transhumanism will become more common. People will enhance or modify themselves significantly with technology and gene therapy. This trend will face pushback and lead to a new type of racism. By then, extraterrestrial beings will have made contact, introducing lots of new and interesting technology from them, as well as changes in religious systems. We are due for an economic crash, which will reset a significant portion of the economy and may cause wars because of it. Video games will be incredibly advanced. Story 4. In 100 years, I imagine we will finally have those flying cars everyone has been talking about since the Jetsons. But we will probably still be complaining about traffic. Plus, I bet robots will do most of our jobs, leaving us to argue over board games and the ethics of sending emojis telepathically. Story 5. After the environmental collapse in about 15 to 20 years from now, and the massive die-off of people, plants, and animals, the new environment will begin to stabilize. The few remaining survivors will start anew as a small agricultural society. In about another 1,000 years, they will have forgotten about the past, and industry and greed will rise again. Story 6. Not great, to be honest. It will be a slightly worse version of where we are now. Real technology progress is slowing to a halt. The artificial intelligence revolution is already grinding innovation and creativity out of existence, making everything a bland remix of existing stuff. In the next decades, it will only perfect beautiful, slick, addictive but unsatisfying worlds which exist to take our time and money and do not even really entertain us. Political progress is in reverse, leading to a society dominated by extreme viewpoints, and both sides are ultra-authoritarian. The next century will bring a succession of ineffective governments which will pass laws which suit their own viewpoints and criminalize dissenting opinions. Pick your poison. Censorship for saying globalization is bad, or censorship for saying women do not have penises. Social progress is in freefall. Within a decade, the majority of 30-year-old women will be childless and single. Relationships and sex will be controlled by companies for profit, without concern for anyone's well-being. We are on the cusp of a mental health disaster. Anxiety, loneliness, and depression have already hit record levels and will continue to spiral out of control, driven by a perfected social media which drives conflict and self-hate for profit. Corporate greed is now beyond the control of government. Companies have learned they do not have to compete. If they work together, they can control the market and continuously raise prices as long as the consumer has no alternative. The property market led the charge, and the food, energy, and commodity sectors are in pursuit. We are about to experience the worst dystopia imaginable. The vast majority of the population will be poor. You will not own property. You will be alone. You will be hated and abused by people who have never met you and know nothing about you. You will not be able to afford children. You will sit in your rented accommodation to get away from the 100-degree heat or constant torrential rain and wind outside, eating food you can barely afford, wondering if you can pay your next energy bill and trying to escape by playing artificial intelligence-generated games and watching artificial intelligence-generated movies, knowing you will never retire even if your depression and anxiety do not kill you first. 100 years. Try 10 years. Story 7. Well-established moon base of over 10 million people. Established Mars colony of at least 500,000. Orbital station somewhere near Jupiter. Active asteroid mining. Earth slowly becoming a nature preserve. Most manufacturing in orbit. Story 8. There will be AI celebrities. There will be tons of AI models trained in specific ways to highlight different features. AI models will go viral. Some will be one-hit wonders that everyone is obsessed with for a week, while others will be around for years. A new type of interactive media will exist, like a cross between an open-world video game and a movie. Regular passive movies will still exist, but in interactive movies, you will be able to dramatically affect the story. Most of today's jobs will no longer exist, but they will be replaced with new jobs that are hard for us to imagine. Space will be mostly the same, but there will be more man-made hardware in space. There will not be permanent bases on other planets, but there will probably be some small-scale experimental industry in space. Maybe something like solar-powered asteroid mining, but probably not profitable and generating only a tiny fraction of Earth-based enterprise. We're still just dipping our toes into space. A new religion will have formed which might be based on some kind of secular non-magical ideology. Maybe a mixture of simulation theory and Christianity, but it'll be an ideology that serves people, that encourages them to act in prosocial ways. Or it's possible a reformed version of an existing religion will attract many followers. But long-term, I don't think we survive without a shared ideology. So the alternative here, I think, is the collapse of civilization, probably via slow decline into a new dark age. Story 9, a lot of BioWare technology. Clean water will probably be super expensive. Artificial intelligence will pretty much be in charge of governing how we live. Cyber dystopian type vibes. Story 10. It will probably be like The Last of Us, trying to hide from fungus-infested monsters, but you'll still be paying high health insurance premiums if you live in the United States. Story 11. Old people will do old people things even with new technology unless, of course, there's a way to slow aging. But if that happens, the world becomes way overcrowded in 100 years. Tolerance and empathy will continue to grow and affect public policy, except in a few select fascist nations. World peace still won't be reached. Neither will poverty and homelessness be solved. In fact, it will get worse. Also, trillionaires will push for lower taxes. Space will be far more open to far more rich people. The brain will be mapped even better. Customized drugs for far better physical and mental performance will be obtainable. Companies will urge people to use them. Artificial intelligence will get way better. So will sex dolls. Men will pay top dollar for the best combinations of the two. Story 12. Everyone will wear augmented reality glasses, contacts, goggles, or visors at all times. With artificial intelligence-assisted technology, you'll be able to almost completely control how the world looks, sounds, and possibly even smells. Holiday decorations, landscaping, political signs, advertisements, and even how your hair or clothes look will all be customizable within the same shared augmented reality overlay. Touring Pompeii, you can enable their official augmented reality overlay, and immediately the ancient city is rebuilt and filled with ancient Pompeians roaming around and going about their daily lives. The same with Civil War battlefields where you can watch historically accurate reenactments filled with artificial intelligence-rendered soldiers, cannon fire, smoke, and everything else. You'd be able to cancel anyone you don't like by having them replaced in the overlay by just a solid black humanoid avatar that sounds like an adult from the Charlie Brown cartoons whenever they talk. You can even enable overlay filters that replace all the cars, advertisements, clothing, and music around you with stuff only found in the 80s or 60s. So 5 people walking the streets of New York City at the same time might be experiencing 5 entirely different decades. Or maybe you're feeling a little down and you want to turn the whole world around you black and white for the day. Or you're feeling good and you want the world around you to look like Toontown from Roger Rabbit. None of these even cover the practical usefulness of things like waypoint paths to destinations, A giant beam of light that comes down from the sky and shows you where your kids ran off to in a crowd, or where your dog is after escaping your yard. I also expect artificial intelligence entertainment to be a pretty huge thing. For instance, you can ask it to whip up an episode of Only Murders in the Building, but with Martin Short replaced with John Candy, if he had lived, or to create an episode of Star Trek, The Next Generation based around a Q that's been assimilated by the Borg. Story 13. Likely both far more and far less technologically advanced than we can imagine at the same time. Many things we consider futuristic will either become obsolete or still not reached by that time, while technologies we cannot yet imagine or are very niche currently will become widespread. Society-wise, I don't expect much to change in the grand scheme of things. Ideas and customs will change, of course, but underlying fundamentals will stay the same. Story 14. Well, apparently we only have 8 years left to avert severe warming, so I guess if Greta is correct, we are done for. 100 years from now, what land hasn't been covered by the ocean will be an empty, hot desert. Personally, I can't see that happening, but it will certainly be an even bigger mess than it is now. Story 15. At the rate we're being exploited to death, I imagine we'll all just turn into slaves to the almighty dollar, and the overlords who own everything will continue to exploit us. Story 16. Many people are unhappy with where they live, mainly due to climate change and geopolitical turmoil, and they are trying to move to other places. However, these areas already have residents who are also experiencing climate discomfort. Story 17. I think in 100 years we would advance more technologically than we did in the past 1,000 years. But only 1% of people will have access to that technology. I also think climate change will completely change the kind of food we produce. Story 18. I bet 100 years ago, if they had asked this question, you would have received the same type of answers. The more dramatic responses are less likely, such as nuclear winter possible but unlikely. Being more crowded, sure. Landscape changes a little, sure. But mostly the same as now, but with more technology, I think. Story 19. Very similar to now, but with millions of climate refugees, increasingly desperate wars between major nations, and technological stagnation. Think of the Depression, but on a global scale for decades. Story 20. Not much different. People are waiting for Superman or Superwoman to come make their lives better. Politicians are making promises to fix things, casting blame on marginalized groups. Story 21. Probably filled with even crazier technology like artificial intelligence everywhere, maybe flying cars, but also dealing with big climate problems and resource shortages. This is going to be a mix of cool advances and tough challenges. Story 22. I believe our world would resemble a place where technology controls everything, from artificial intelligence cities to space travel. However, the real question is whether humanity can keep up with its own innovations and remain connected to each other. Story 23. Sex lives will be dramatically different, even on a mainstream level. The technology to indulge fantasies will be so amazing that people who don't indulge will be in the minority. Monogamy won't be as common anymore either. More people, particularly women, will understand that sex and love aren't one and the same and can be separated. The internet as we know it will be long gone. All aspects will be so heavily monitored in so many ways, no one who expects any sort of privacy would dare consider using it for anything nefarious. Flying cars of sorts will finally be a thing, but they will be fully automated with set courses you can't deviate from, and used to access specific targeted areas. There will also be a similar setup in the form of sky buses for the general public, which will be a free public service. Working remotely will be the norm, sector permitting. China and India will still be the largest producers. However, they will have to adhere to considerably stricter standards. America's more centralized regions, previously referred to as flyover states, will be considerably more populated following the mass exodus from both the west and east coasts following massive flooding. Both New York and Los Angeles will still be around, but weather shifts brought on from climate change have made both coasts largely uninhabitable. The average lifespan will be well into the 90s and beyond. Grand Theft Auto 6 should be on its second patch. Story 24. I believe that everyone might become overweight due to the convenience provided by ChatGPT. Our lives have become easier, Warfare is now conducted virtually using robots, and the oceans could swiftly reveal the long-lost city of Atlantis. Story 25. I honestly wonder if it will even still be here. Things are changing so quickly and not necessarily all for the better. Misinformation, what we are doing to the Earth, technology that becomes dangerous. I think 100 years is long enough for us to destroy ourselves. Story 26. In ruins, millions dead, nature utterly destroyed, a tribal survival of the fittest lifestyle for 99.9999% of the population. The rest are multigazillionaires in air-conditioned biodomes, consuming the rest of the endangered species and sipping what is depicted as very rare and controversial delicacies. Story 27. I feel like they are going to start solving problems with solutions we have already had before. Tired of paying for 65 subscription services for TV? What if we bundled them all together and called it? Or, tired of having social media and ads shoved in your face all day, but need to stay connected? A new simple phone meant just for calling and texting. This is already a thing, but I could see it taking off.